share.
Do you want me to start? Or?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Well, I kind of thought about it for a minute if I wanted to do just like a coworker or someone I wasn't very close with, or someone that I spent a lot of time around. And I got married this summer, so I decided to do it with my husband because I thought that that would be kind of interesting. And it, to be honest, made it more difficult as opposed to if I was doing it with just a coworker. I could pick really pretty much anything, and they really wouldn't know specifics. But my husband pretty much thinks he knows me super well, so I thought that would be really interesting because we have similar personalities. So I guess based on my reaction to things, he pretty much can predict that most of the time.
Well, what was his success rate?
But when it comes to facts about me, he actually only got 1 right.
Out of
3. And then we ended up, actually it became kind of a challenge at that point because he was really frustrated. And he's like, okay, well you do these on me. And we ended up going back and forth for a while.
Okay.
But I only recorded the first 3 because I thought we were only supposed to do it once.
Okay, but if you remember offhand, what was your success rate?
I actually got 2 of them correct. I mean, sorry, when we played it twice, I got all of them correct twice, and then I did it 1 time. Because he did it 3. Does that make sense?
So we have 9 total.
Yes.
And we got 4.
Yeah.
Did you do extra rounds also?
Mm-hmm.
What
Yes.
was his overall success?
He would only get 1 right each time.
So we also have 9.
Yeah. And he was
actually very similar 6 right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which was kind of funny because I thought we knew each other very well. So do you want me to list off, like, I typed up a couple of the ones that I asked him.
Yeah.
And the first 3 was one is I went to cheer camp when I was little. I had my first kiss when I was 14. I love volunteering at our daughter's school. And which one do you think he got right? And his response
I don't know, my thought is that the lie is the 3rd one.
No, it actually isn't. That one was true. He said 1 and 3 are true and 2 is false. You talk about being an athlete when you were younger, so you probably started at cheerleading. And 14 is too old for our first kiss. And I'm sure you volunteer a lot, so you're an involved parent. Was kind of where he came out with it. And actually, 1 was false and 2 was true. So that was kind of funny that he went, I guess, based off of the fact that I did sports when I was younger, that cheer camp must have been something that I obviously did. But I think it's because I pushed that I want our daughters to do cheer camp. And he doesn't because he thinks that they should be basketball and soccer players and more what he considers more sport. And I think 14 is just fine to have your first kiss.
14? I didn't have my first kiss till I was 17.
Thank you. He was so shocked that that was very old. And so the questions kind of were based more, that we asked each other more on what happened before we met versus anything that happened afterwards. And I noticed that neither one of us really did behavioral things like, you know, I get sad when I watch movies or things like that he would already know about me because we've been together for almost 5 years.
So what were you able to get him to articulate kind of, was there anything in your behavior as you were talking through these things that he was using as cues, or is he strictly going off of info he knows from before?
It was pretty much strictly info off of what he knew before and then arguing.
And then arguing with you about your own experiences. Okay, good. Okay.
Because I was laughing, I guess.
What about with you? Do you remember anything in his demeanor? Because you had a slightly higher accuracy rate. What were you using?
As far as, I was pretty much going off of, like, what made my decisions. Is that what you're asking?
Wait, what made you decide which one was the lie?
Pretty much past experiences or just conversations with himself or with other family members. So pretty much things I was already aware of. But also, I mean, he picked one weird things like, I like onions in my food. And I know just that he doesn't like onions at all because he thinks that they taste bad. So I guess that would be kind of knowledge that he's given me, but also just awareness because of our interactions and just living together too.
Okay. So totally didn't use any kind of cues in the moment.
No, not really.
Can you think back and remember anything that you, in retrospect, can notice different?
I mean, his reaction reactions to things as we were talking about them.
Right.
I mean, if he would kind of smile, or if he thought that I was maybe wrong, he would start smiling. And then if it was something that he thought I should know, it was kind of like if I said, well, I don't remember that quite well, or let me think about that, he would kind of be like, you should know this, like this is something you should know. And that would make me think back to more things. So I guess I would cue back on how he was reacting to me, or what his expression was, based on how much thought I needed to put into it, or maybe how accurate I was being.
If I can generalize from that, it sounds like what she's really reacting to, in a more abstract level, is that she's thinking about silences. Length of pause before reaction.
Yeah. Okay. I'm kind of wordy.
No, it's okay. It's just we're articulating into our calm language. Leonard, share your results.
Sure. Okay. I thought we were only supposed to do it once.
Well,
but
obviously, some people enjoy it. You only have to do it once.
okay. So I did it with a friend of mine.
Cool.
I think he's a friend of 2 years. He was a friend of 2 years, and
Okay. Good. We now have data at both ends of our relational continua.
yeah, and he guessed mine, but I didn't manage to guess his.
So he
he nailed it. I did not. Or
I'm
he,
gonna call that three. So what was he using? Did you get him to talk about it at all? What made him cue in?
he used my pause. At least that's what he said. Like I paused in 2 of them, but the second one, which like my set was, I went to various Christian summer camps, and one of them on Woody Island had like a 25-foot buoy swing. The second set was, I had a friend named Bongo, like an imaginary friend named Bongo.
Oh, okay.
And we would wander in the forest together and just have fun just walking around. And my third was, I enjoy looking at maps. I really like visual representations of data. So, and he managed to see a difference between a pause like just before the summer camps bit, and the pause when I tripped up on his Bongo's name.
Okay.
So,
And so
so that's how he managed to guess mine. At least that's what he told me. And I believe him because he kind of he added a little bit extra. He said I can believe that. But
so there's also a degree of fit being judged, even with a relative stranger. Not that y'all are strangers, but less close.
yeah.
Good. Good. What did you use? What did you try to use to guess which one of his was the lie?
I tried to use body language more than anything, or eye contact.
And the eye contact totally didn't work.
No, not really.
Good. Ashley,
Yes.
do you have results from your experimental lying game?
I do.
I was wondering which one of his were false.
The second one.
The bongo.
Yep.
Right after I left here, I couldn't remember if we were doing how many, so I did extra ones.
Oh, cool. Good. We have extra data sets.
I used
A lot of
two
people find
different
it very
people. I used a
Cool.
complete stranger
Ooh.
and
Okay.
then somebody who just is kind of like a social acquaintance.
Okay. Can we actually start with the second one of those two, the social acquaintance?
Yes.
Okay. How long have we known this person?
Probably about a year.
Excellent. Good. Good comparable data.
Alright, and so you want me to just tell you what was it? How
First,
many-
give me the results. guess successfully which was the lie?
For the most part,
What do we mean for the most part?
cause, okay, so I did 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 questions all together.
Okay.
And I did 2 truths, cause I was like, is it supposed to be 2 truths or 2 lies?
Okay,
And
that's cool. That works too.
Alright, do you want me to tell you like exactly?
Yeah. So of the ones that you gave them 5, you said?
Yeah.
And so how many did they get right?
Actually all of them I think except for 1.
Really?
Yes.
Okay.
Just because of a little bit, even though she's not like one of my like good friends, she knows me enough just from what I've seen.
Okay, so what is she using? When you asked her about it, what is she using to tell whether you're true?
I would
Truth or
say
lie?
more just the knowledge and because one of them was my favorite color is pink, so she was like, well, you have a lot of pink stuff in my phone cover, so she was using observations that she's made in the past, and then like one of them was I have 2 dogs, and she's seen my dogs before in my car.
Okay.
And then the one that she did get wrong was I put that I'm an avid hunter or camper, and she said yes because we live in Alaska, so she was using the location, but that one was wrong because I don't hunt fish. And the one that I thought was more interesting was the person who didn't know me at all because they were strictly just
So
using.
she didn't talk at all about things like how you delivered the information. She didn't talk about any of your nonverbal
No, I
cues.
tried
She didn't
to.
try to guess based on. Okay. So, second with the stranger.
The stranger, he got quite a few wrong because he was just like, one of them was I have a 12-year-old son, and he said no because I seem like I'm in my mid-20s and that would put me at 14, so he like used my appearance, and the pink he said yes because I had the pink stuff. Then the hunting one he's got wrong too because I live in
Because it's
Alaska.
Did he say that though?
Yes.
Okay.
He said true because my sweatshirt, yes, definitely, he said, because I'm from Alaska. And then the 2 dogs, he looked at my shirt and didn't see any dog hair, so he said no, that I didn't have dogs, because he said that he had dogs.
So, appearance is a big one here.
And then, for the one, because I was like, I'm married, which I'm not, I got divorced, he put no because there's no tan line where my wedding ring was. So he actually did explain why, but it was mostly all appearance.
Okay. And so he got 1 out of 5? 2
yeah,
out of 5.
1. Because
Cool.
he only got the pink being my favorite color, so the rest of them were wrong.
But notice that he was willing enough to take a guess on every single one of those. And give reasons. Like, he had a coherent fit, relationships among sets of facts, right? So.
And he did take his time answering a couple because he kind of was like, no, and I tried.
Where was this when you cornered this stranger?
At the Oasis.
Okay. And so, what do we.
We were eating lunch and he was just sitting there.
There is some sense in which fit, even in this context, becomes important, i.e., Alaskan bar, this is not like, the Oasis, right? And so it does tend to play up our kind of emphasis on averages among Alaskan behaviors, logically, I would think. What do we notice as we compare across our data collection?
It's like it kind of becomes more of them right, more the longer they've known.
That and that people are relying on visual data to try to see what is true or not true.
Highlights the visual bias. Yes. So among, for example, the different problems with deception detection that the article is laying out, visual bias is one that we can see at work from the start.
And I thought the guys, when he said no about having a 12-year-old son, because he goes, you seem like you're in your mid-20s, which is totally wrong too, because I'm going to be 30. So he was thinking I was more like 22 to 25. And that's what
I
he
wonder
was.
whether he's actually, well, anyways, that's speculation that we really can't
But also,
suggest one way or
I
another.
feel like what sometimes isn't really put into like the questions and how much you're trying to trick the other person. Because I know when I did this like a year ago, mine were like some that were like relatively like one that was like really far fetched. You know, an experience I had done that was very very strange and weird and not realistic at all. And then another one that was like kind of in the middle. And then one that was like just a straight, like, you know,
Pretty
really,
typical.
yeah, typical.
And that was the lie.
No, my, yeah, the typical one was a lie. It was just like, I guess I was trying to kind of trick them, but I thought that would be more fun.
Mm-hmm.
So, I don't know. Like, I feel like this, it's really reliant on the types of questions. Like, you know, her
Yeah.
questions were really straightforward. And so those are almost harder to guess than the ones that, like, I feel when people are telling some sort of, you know, they're either putting too much detail into it if they're telling a lie.
And usually I can get my data results to kind of show me something about like when the verbal part
Yeah.
is what we're cueing into and using to detect deception. Because yeah, a lot of the times what will happen is that the excessively wordy one is going to be the one that's a lie, or will be picked as a lie, because it's like the lady doth protest too
Yeah,
much.
mine got picked as a lie. The one that was more wordy and more descriptive got picked as a lie.
Right, the
And
one that's a
that's
weird
specifically what I was
experience but
trying-
isn't in fact the lie that you picked. Does that make sense to everybody? And like there's all these other cues that we usually sometimes will pick up on. So for example, sometimes people will use what they know of the person asking questions to try to figure out like are they more likely to try to be deliberately tricking me, and will they therefore go after the one that is the most common looking, because they'll figure that's they'll have this theory of Mary that she's likely to try to just trick me, to really try hard, right? We also don't have any here. The silences one is the only one that is an interactional based cue. And so we don't have any examples where like voice volume dropping is sometimes thought of as a cue and sometimes comes up, and sometimes is actually pretty accurate, because we'll speak a little softer when we're not sure of something, right? And that can be cued in as the likely detection, the likely deception. So we didn't use any cues like the verbal audio cues at all, even though we had access to that. We didn't use any cues like gestures, and that often comes up. Because when we had done it before, wasn't one of the cues that was more reliable actually the degree of animation? Like gestures and...
I don't think I did it with you. I did it with
Oh,
Jean.
sorry.
But I would say gestures were definitely.
And
We actually did it in have somebody come to the front of the class and you told the rest of the class your three truths and a lie.
yeah,
Yeah, that was. I thought that was really cool, just because you're all kind of looking at them.
yeah.
Really looking
Every
at the
nonverbal
nonverbals
gets-
and.
And so that one, that way you're much more likely to pick up on expectancy violation bias that the article talks about. You'll actually usually get a really nice clear illustration about expectancy violation bias when you do it, where we have more chance to talk about nonverbals on it.
I think for my questions, they brought more of the, I just forgot the word that we were gestures would have came up if it was maybe a different environment where there weren't so many other people around, and then be able to kind of,
Yeah,
or if
so
we were
use
sitting
that
directly
more.
across from each other instead of beside.
I'm surprised though that you didn't try to use eye contact, because typically eye contact is
I
the
didn't
first.
look at them for any of them. I was just like, oh wow.
Oh, so there was no variation in eye contact, so you
I
couldn't
didn't.
try to
I
use
didn't
eye
because
contact.
I was like purposely trying not to sound different when I said the questions or whatever.
Okay. Okay.
So I kind of did them all the same, even the ones that weren't true. So they
Well-
probably all could have sounded like.
Right. And since you know that eye contact is used so often, you deliberately cut it out. Even though, of course, the other thing that we often do is we deliberately will
Sorry,
mislead using
I
eye
usually
contact.
don't.
What are some of the other cues that oftentimes come up when you play this, or when you in practice try to do deception detection?
Voice inflections,
Okay. Can you specify?
like pitch.
What would you expect? What would you use as a cue to suggest that it's deceptive?
They're more animated or.
And so typically, I might guess, actually I could run that argument either way though, is the danger.
Yeah.
It's like they want to be casual and nonchalant about it, so they just kind of mention it, or it's like they want to really sell it to you.
In which case you'll get the more ups and downs.
Yeah.
And so, I guess it's one of those things where you have to read in context. Are they trying to deceive? If I assume that they're mostly honest, then presumably the greater ups and downs would heighten attention and perhaps lead to deception, judgment.
Well, that kind of like, my husband knows that when I tell a lie, I usually smile or laugh. And so I deliberately like made a point to do that on some of my truths. And so I think that that was misleading and that ties into what you're doing.
Yes! Yes!
Because I'm just like a terrible liar usually.
That's an important cue. Even though he doesn't articulate it as such. He doesn't point to the fact, but you can tell that that's something that's influencing deception detection.
We were talking about eye contact, but they always say that you look up and to the left
Good.
because you're like trying to remember or think about it.
And I can never remember whether it's to the left for creative and to the right for memory or vice versa.
Yeah.
I thought it didn't really matter.
There's
Or
some neuroscience research that suggests that when we're accessing the creative centers, we're more likely to look to one side versus the other.
Or like looking up or
Some.
something.
Well, in both cases, accessing thought, you're likely to glance upwards, up and away, rather than down. If you're glancing down and away, it's usually to look at a reference that's concrete, or a cue in context, right? Right. Right. Just nod and agree with me. Whereas when we're trying to access something non-present, memory, creativity, whatever, we usually tend to glance either side or up, right? And when, for example, they make these elaborate studies about witnesses on the stand for legal trials, this is one of the only places where there's enough money to bother investing the research to do this kind of neuroscience shit, pardon my French. And so what they've argued is that you can tell with witnesses pretty reliably based on direction of the glance.
Have you ever watched Lie to Me?
No, I don't even know that this is.
So, Lie to Me is a TV series, and I have no idea if there's any sort of factual basis in it. However, it's supposed to be this guy who is a scientist and studies facial recognition, and that it's impossible to lie to him because of the facial recognition that you automatically give. So, my facial, you'd be amused, you have kind of a, versus, so they're able to use it in like police investigations and other sort of things.
it is based on actual work. Paul Ekman, the work of Paul Ekman.
Ekman and Friesen are Palo Alto School from communication. Yes. Yeah. gain from Ekman and Friesen, for those of you that are doing public speaker and related works, the universally recognizable expressions is kind of the earliest work that they did, the cross-cultural. What are the nonverbal expressions that are cross-cultural? And they were able to kind of isolate roughly 7 that are reliably recognizable cross-culturally.
What were those? Anger, happiness, shame.
Yep.
Contempt and
Fear.
fear.
Yep.
But I think the trouble with his work, at least according to Wikipedia, is that he doesn't let anybody else access it. Like he hasn't officially published it in a journal, if I recall. Like he's I know he's done some published work that tells you, okay, this, like we have this, this, and this means this, but he didn't say, like, tell us the process of how he came to that.
My understanding from what I have studied, which is basically Burgoon. Okay, let me go back to what our articles here says. As far as Burgoon knows, we have a shitty record of detecting deception even among the very best trained professionals. The average person on the street has roughly 47% chances, or 54%, sorry, chances of detecting deception successfully, and the best trained professionals ranges maybe as high as 33, as a 66% chance of successfully detecting detection, which is barely better than rolling a dice.
Detecting lies and the truths and stuff, it's almost too as if you have to kind of know somebody a little bit, or like if you know them.
Well,
better,
okay,
then
right.
maybe you could be more accurate.
You might believe that, but our data suggests quite opposite. She's using her husband. I should probably clarify that. And so no, because the problem is, as we get to know somebody better, they also get to know us better.
Oh, so then they can.
And so in
like how
fact,
she knew how to laugh for some of her tricks
Right.
and smile because she knew that he'd pick up on that.
right.
Okay.
And so in general, what we find is that deception detection does not go up as relational variables. It doesn't depend on that. Now, length of a specific interaction period does seem to have perhaps some interaction effect. What do you remember from the article? Assuming you read it. What do you remember from the article about length of interaction and its impact on deception detection?
I think that the longer that you have to be able to go through it, the more likelihood you're going to be able to pull out something that's deceiving you.
What did we find in that is the hypothesis.
Yeah.
Yes. So the hypothesis is that through interaction we're better able to discover deception, like through that specific interaction period. As in, for example, if I have had more turns with this game, I would expect over. Did we find over the course of? But we didn't find that either. And indeed, what Burgoon finds is quite the opposite. That over the length of the interaction, as the interaction length went up. Now, she's talking about one-way interactions still, right? Not full two-way interactions. So maybe we would need to hypothesize that it's not the length of interaction, but the intensity of the interaction. Except in our tiny little data sample, we still don't see any evidence of. In fact, our evidence, such as it is, suggests quite the opposite. We become better and better at deceiving each other. Yeah?
We're a really good couple, I swear.
No, it's okay. It's okay. Patrick and I play this game all the time too. We are really good at deceiving each other when we decide we want to. And it's terrible because it actually just leads to greater confusion in normal interactions.
Are you doing that thing that you did that one time when we were playing that game?
You're doing that one thing again. Yep. Oh, and it's all good. And so this is not meant to be a reflection on the ways in which deception You can't go from deception detection to evaluating relationships. Pretty obvious. Nor can you really actually. Given what we know from like Sandra Petronio and privacy management stuff, you can't even actually evaluate deception's prevalence in relationships.
There's that guy, Gottman, I want to say. He's out of Seattle, who says that he can listen to a married couple in their communication for like 5 minutes and determine whether or not they will get divorced.
I've heard that argument. I haven't heard him make that claim. Have we seen any evidence from him backing up that claim?
I've only, when I get pushied from married friends who are like, you must read this book, and I'm like, I don't know about this. I don't know.
Right.
But they call it the Love Lab, where they send these couples in and observe their interactions with each other over a course of time.
He has a really nice video online if you want to go and watch kind of the things that he's using for cues. Because he does a good job of dissecting it.
Also, that couple's on display.
Well,
Probably the nicest couple ever.
The drawback is I haven't actually seen them publish like hard and fast results
Yeah.
in a proper publication. I've
Yeah.
seen the book, which sells very well.
Yeah. I mean, the things that he's saying for it, it does seem to kind of, like you would think that a lot of the sort of stuff that I've been seeing, I mean, as far as Burgoon, seeing is believing. That's basically what, you know.
She's saying.
Yeah.
That's one of the conclusions we can draw, is that in fact the visual mode is the fact that we all have a visual bias. And that's, you know, human species is in fact the most difficult to detect deception. So which is the mode, backing up for just a second, which is the mode that's most successful for detecting deception?
Audio.
Pure audio. Rather than pure textual. Why is pure textual not good for detecting deception?
Can't tell any sort of inflection or any.
So we're talking about cues filtered out.
Yeah.
Okay, if one of y'all would be willing to quickly summarize what we mean, because Burgoon only just briefly references this cues filtered out model that she's talking about. What do we mean by cues filtered out? I mean, maybe it's so obvious that you don't care, but articulate it for us.
It sounds like what we pay attention to, and everything else just falls by the wayside.
And so historically, go ahead.
Taking out like all the pauses because you can't tell where they are and all that.
Depersonalizing.
Yeah, that's just
Right.
scripting
So-
what the person's saying without anything that's context.
That makes it a person anymore. Right. And so one of the important things about the text
Too often.
format is that one good thing about it is it removes some of our truth bias, i.e. we tend to prefer to, when we guess wrong, it is more likely to be that we judge a deception as true than a truth as a deception, in general. Text reverses that. And that's partly because of the ways in which it depersonalizes the message. I no longer have...
They're guilty.
Right, exactly. So we get a lot more of that, and maybe that's useful in certain circumstances. Since I like when in her conclusions, one of the things you'll notice is she talks about that each of these modes might have advantages in different circumstances, might be our preferred mode for particular types of work. And you probably maybe remember noting in her conclusions where she talks about how one suggestion from this research is that it means our security forces probably ought to rely on text as much as they can because of that depersonalization, which leads us to be far more likely to assume deception. Also removes some of the demeanor bias. What's the demeanor bias, real quick?
Sounds like it would be visual bias based on stereotypes.
Visual bias is a separate thing, or at least she has attempted to operationalize them separately. Right? Right.
The tendency to judge some senders' communication styles as credible, irrespective of their actual truthfulness.
Right.
It's how much like.
What
liking
happens
is
early in
fun.
an interaction leads to a credibility judgment, and we know this, right? Those first 30 seconds of interaction that people always talk about. So initial snap judgment, if initial snap judgment is truthful, the tendency is to assume truthful throughout. Similarly, if the initial snap judgment is deceptive, it will. And so one variable that is interesting to trace through in our little in-class experiments is those who put the lie first compared to those who put the lie later. One thing that we didn't have any people are often unwilling to assume that the first one is the lie. And so those who are deceptive might be well advised to put that first. On the other hand, the danger is if expectancy violation bias leads us to judge that first one as deceptive, the rest will be judged as deceptive whether they are or not. Right? So,
And then also,
Yeah.
there's way more pressure on that first one for you to like perfect it. Whereas
Yeah.
if it's the second and third one, it's
you can
so-
hide it kind of in the middle, right? Because we know how
Even
to
as
take
the last
advantage
one,
of the
you can
primacy
just kinda-
recency effect.
Yeah.
We totally do.
And the last one, you can just be nonchalant about it. It's like, I already done all the rest of them. I lied out of the
And
way.
we expect it, and so it's much easier to get away with, for example, speaking more rapidly through the lie, which we often do. If I have it in the last position, because they can play it off as part of the recency effect. That's what we mean by demeanor bias. Does that make sense to everybody? Cool. Which one of those biases that she tries to separate out operationally for us, which one of those is the dominant bias in her results?
Well, I would wonder if you gave, if your thinking is that you are looking for a lie, but everything you're reading in front of you is true, if you're going to pick one out just because you have been told to be able to pick one out.
Yes. Yes. And so one of the things we need to question about her research methods, and that's true for all of these deception detection researchers. Let's take into account the experimental context and what the experimental context is doing. Because you're there, you know because of informed consent laws that you're there to detect lies. You've already been primed to look for.
Mm-hmm.
And so your truth bias is presumably mitigated somewhat by that. I don't know a way to imagine setting up an experiment that lets us get around that. Given that it is illegal to bring somebody into an experiment under entirely false premises.
And you just refuse to tell them.
Go to Mexico.
Yes, human subjects ethics. Okay. What might one imagine doing as an example to try to investigate this that doesn't then fall into the problems of the experiment and the ways in which experimental participation already heightens our suspicions, and actually would even if I were able to be very carefully ambiguous in my informed consent forms, just being in the experiment
Yeah, I mean.
already heightens one's, you're going to have your little feelers out.
And then also when they say, was this person lying? I wonder what they're studying.
Right, I wonder what they're studying exactly.
I wonder if I'm part of the control group or not.
Exactly, right. And so given that there's this ethic of suspicion, with just the context, inevitably, what else might we imagine trying to do?
For what?
To try to get at deception detection. Like how would we try to learn anything about
Well, I think the two-way interaction is something that's really important.
I'd like
And
to
I
say
think
that.
demeanor bias is going to be extremely prevalent there.
And so one thing I might be able to do is I might be able to collect systems level aggregate data, and I'd use TSA to do that. Right? Right. What have I done by shifting to this new context, this TSA aggregated data about how many times the same person gets stopped going through TSA, right? Because that's what you're getting at, right? With demeanor bias, because you would presumably be able to detect it over time and across set checkpoints.
Also, I was just saying that being able to actually converse with the person back and forth, I would say that that would higher demeanor bias, just because it's like you're not just watching the person and making the snap judgment, you're watching that person and then you're asking them questions and then they're, so how they're answering the questions, like, will...
Well, and TSA interactions do let me do that, because they are two-way interactions.
Yeah.
And so I have that accounted for, I can control for that, and I have the advantage of systems, of a very broad spectrum. It's very shallow data in some, it's very bimodal, right? Strictly dichotomous. Either they get checked or they don't.
What's kind of funny is in the little Latinese series, he finds his protege out of TSA.
Good. We'd love to believe that.
Yeah.
We'd love to believe that. My only inclination is to say that TSA is likely to have ruined them instead.
Well, yeah.
That's my cynicism. One of the things you'll find is that, or might pick up on, is that as we shift towards that, we're moving a little bit away from the sexological category of communication theorizing and much more into a systems level approach to communication theorizing.
Well, like, what if you had people go
Which they
through
call cybernetic, by the way.
TSA and one of them, like, did have a weapon in their bag and they got checked, to then the people that didn't have a weapon in their bag?
I would love to be able to control for false positives versus false negatives. And you will never get that from the systems level data. But it would be nice to at least have, I don't even think you can get close to it, actually. Our better data set, if what we're really interested in is detecting of false positives versus false negatives, is let's talk to some of the private detectives that get hired to investigate marital infidelities and see how often those come up false positive versus false negative.
Is that ethical?
No. This will never pass human subjects board.
No, I just meant in general.
Actually, interviewing the detectives, I could get past human subjects board. Because it's an interview. And the fact that what they're doing violates over human subjects, right? They have human subjects ethics. Yeah, well.
It's like, we didn't do it, they did it. We're just talking to them about it.
I would get a lot of grief. In the same way that they don't really like us using, like the Nazis did all these experiments, and some of them have interesting implications on human health. Like we can learn about certain things and their toxicity levels. Nobody will use that data set even when it exists because, gross. The data collection was bad enough that I won't even try to data mine it. And I think private detectives may be in that category also. Where it's gross enough, I'm not even going to data mine that. Somebody else will, though. That's all right. What are some of the other things one might imagine doing if one is interested in deception detection and kind of trying to imagine it in some of the, let me back up. What are the ways in which we recognize that this is a beautiful example of social psychological communication theorizing? Asking you to link it back to the chapter from the text. It's based in individual psychology, right? Individuals have truth biases, demeanor biases. Those are held at the level of individual cognition, right? It's consensus-based.
I wonder if you could do for like poker players.
Ooh.
Because then it's all being very. There is some. It wouldn't be all messy with
And you've got
and
high
sort of ethics.
motivations.
Yeah, and it's very. And they're skilled at it. They're supposed to be professional deceivers and lie detectors.
Right.
And then what are their cues? Because they're usually playing with, some of them are either complete strangers or semi sort of.
Right.
You know, because
'Cause
you're
at the
in the
highest
same
level, it's the
circuit.
circuit.
Right. So, like, and you figuring out a person's tell is that big thing. And so how do you do that or figure that out, or, you know, so I think that if someone studied that set of people, that would be interesting.
I think most
People have done that, of course.
tells are linked into an emotional response almost, really. They're part of an emotional response.
And then they're doing
Those are
all these
the
fake
you.
tells.
Right.
Oh. Got a bad card. I'll be the worst poker player ever.
It takes a rare breed to be really truly good at it. But yeah, this is another place where the money is big enough that the neuroscientists have gotten interested enough to actually be able to measure direct to what extent eye dilation, pupil dilation can be faked.
Oh, that's really interesting. That's
You can
fascinating.
control that.
You can. You can control, or at least some people. I can't. But there are people at these high levels who are able to control for the degree of pupil dilation. And they do it using these biofeedback, you know, where they're envisioning dark room in order to force the pupil dilation that indicates heightened excitement.
Or
Crazy.
you just heighten your excitement.
Well, I mean, presumably their excitement is already quite heightened. I can't imagine. You're playing for such big stakes. God, how can you not be excited? But anyways. And it's too bad that we can't do that more routinely because, you know, what is the other thing that pupil dilation is often read as? Nonverbal attraction.
There's
And to be able to control that would be awfully useful.
I think I can't remember. I think it might be in Japan where they use the pupil dilation.
Artificially.
Yeah.
Where they'll actually drop in,
Yeah, and it makes their eyes.
what is that? What is it?
It makes you blind.
Over long
After
term.
a long term. Yeah. I forget what it's called.
When
We
you
were just talking
dilate your
about it
eyes?
yesterday.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it puts it in
But
your eyes.
it's
your eyes
thought of as so
dilate.
attractive
Yeah, it's
because
so
it
attractive.
suggests sexual excitement
Yeah.
Oh.
that they'll
That
take
girls
that risk.
use it to attract guys because then they think they're attracted
That
to
sounds
them.
as
So they're-
stupid as when I heard, like, if you put hairspray in your eyes, it makes your eyes brighter. Like, that sounds ridiculous. Oh.
The lengths people will go to be attractive to the other gender. Goodness. And
Or you could
oh,
just
you aren't
wear
wearing
just
heels.
that.
I was gonna tease you ferociously because I thought boots had heels on them. About the lengths we go to
No.
make ourselves attractive to the other gender. Because
No.
our heels are just as.
And it's hilarious because they make no sense here in Alaska. Have you ever tried walking on high heels in like the snow and ice?
I have.
I have
I
only
like
once,
them.
and I will never ever do it again.
For anybody else.
I quit wearing heels when I moved here.
I'm
Because
slowly
it's
getting
like-
weeded away
You're
from
almost
it.
gonna die.
The
I
gravel
feel like
roads.
it's danger.
It is. It's literally.
There's no
Totally.
grip on the bottom of them. That's why I
Nope.
wear boots and flats. I also just can't wear high heels because I have such high arches.
Oh,
So
yeah.
it looks hilarious because I'll put my foot in, you can see like the top of my arch.
You should have been a ballerina.
That's what I've been told.
Okay. What else do we learn from Burgoon's article? What did y'all make of the charts on page 585? What do you notice from them? 584 and 585. The 585 is the one that I really find interesting.
Tried to read through the article on my phone.
Yeah, that's probably not effective with probably most of these articles. But
I'm gonna start printing them out though.
just as in general, when I read articles like this, I need to have margins and I scribble ferociously in my
That's
margins.
what I wanted to be able to do.
Yeah,
I just
exactly.
got at least.
With my Nook, I can highlight it and leave notes.
Right.
So that's
If you
really
have
nice.
like a Kindle device or something like that, you can do the same effect.
Yeah, I
and
still
that-
enjoy the paper more. It's just I have to keep it somewhere.
Yeah.
I had this article from
version that she presented of it some years ago. And then I have this one, and then I have a little short communique that she wrote up summarizing some of it. So that's another way to approach reading these things. If you're having trouble with one version of it, find the author and find what else they've written. Because oftentimes it's based in the same research program, and sometimes they'll have earlier versions that are easier to approach, or sometimes they'll have later versions where they've hyper-digested it for a commercial audience.
Is this one, it's written differently than before? It's not the same one, is it, that I read before?
It may be a different version.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Like I said, I have several versions
I
of
just
her same
remember
research program.
when I was reading through it, I didn't remember this
Yeah.
exact wording, but it was like all the same information.
Yeah, it's a lot, it's an ongoing research program, right? It's obviously of interest to a lot of people, so you're going to find a lot of variations on this work. In part because she needs to be addressing a lot of different audiences, but also because, you know, this data takes so long to collect. One of the things that I thought y'all might highlight as you were reading over it is you might have been inclined towards critiquing, because in the end, each individual condition, given all the variables that she's dealing with, each condition only has 17 people in it.
Yep.
But think how many conditions she's got, and given that you had to have tested each of the materials, the audio, the visual, and the textual, in advance as well, that's, you know, 10 years worth of labor pretty easily. And so it makes sense that we probably have met an earlier version of that same research program, even though it's only been a year, 2 years, 1 year, whatever it is.
1 year.
And yeah, I got stuff from going back to, from this stuff going back to 2006, 2005. Anyways, what do we notice particularly as we review her data that she's collected? What are the ones where there's a really strong difference between detecting truth versus detecting deception? The false positives versus false negatives.
Audio visual.
Yep. The modality is the biggest change. What are the ones that make the most similar? Like where false positives, false negatives are most closely related from these? Oh. I only have one person with the data to actually sit and review it. Okay, sorry.
I totally forgot my
So not gonna be able to do much with this. But I would encourage you to sort of go back and read the article as you're answering the quiz questions with those questions in mind, okay? Go forth and find out.
Oh.
Yeah, exactly. Time. See what became of us. And I am always in danger of talking over on these. So on days when I can just leave you with command to go forth and find out, I'm pretty content to do so. I will let you go.
Do you want
Have a
our
quiz?
stuff on the
No, I was content with the data that I have here, oral transmission of data. That works just fine. It actually really nicely highlights that actually if you average across our data sets, we're at exactly that 50-50 rate. Or not quite exactly. We're one off from exact 50-50.
And do you have a copy of another copy of the quiz?
Oh, yes. Yes.
I split mine up and gave half mine to Mary.
Oh, very
At
much.
your office, can I put a slip?
Yes, you can also download it from Blackboard.
Oh, okay.
And I don't actually have any physical copies on hand, so that's what I would be doing anyway. Thank you for recording for us.